Deep within the heavenly river, strange fluctuations began to emerge. At the same time, Chen's eyes, which had just opened, were filled with a look of surprise. He realized that the mark he had left within the heavenly river spirits had once again appeared in his perception. However, the fluctuations emanating from the mark seemed slightly different from before. This time, instead of 99 marks, there was only one. Yet, it was this single mark's fluctuation that left Chen utterly shocked. If the previous 99 heavenly river spirits were like timepieces, then this one wave felt like a blazing sun, shining across the world with endless light. Noticing these changes, Chen couldn't help but smile. Based on the current situation, it seemed that his previous guess was about 70 to 80% correct. The so-called 100th heavenly river spirit truly couldn't be obtained by ordinary means. Boom! As Chen felt surprised in his heart, above the heavenly river, the vast spirit light transformed into a massive lake above Zhu Yin, Xiao Xiao, Kalavara, Linjing, and the others. The lake trembled, and soon, a giant waterfall cascaded from it, enveloping them. The waterfall contained extremely pure energy, and its water had a thick, viscous consistency. Within, fine dust sparkled, a kind of condensed spiritual energy so refined that just a single speck might surpass tens of thousands of drops of supreme spiritual liquid. And its purity was astonishing. When the spirit light waterfall descended, Zhu Yin and the others immediately activated their supreme Dharmakayas, ready to face the baptism. Zhu Yin was the first to reveal his supreme Dharmakaya. The overwhelming fire element gathered behind him, and within moments, it transformed into a massive fiery figure, burning with an unstoppable flame that twisted the void. From a distance, it looked like a fire god. Is that the fire god Dharmakaya that Zhu Yin cultivates? I heard it's one of the clan's most powerful Dharmakayas, ranking 34th on the supreme Dharmakaya ranking among the 99. When Zhu Yin's fire god-like Dharmakaya appeared, countless exclamations rang out from all directions. Almost every strong practitioner gazed at it with envy. This rank of supreme Dharmakaya was so rare that even top-tier forces like the Great Xia dynasty didn't possess one, showing just how precious it was. Chen, staring at the fire god-like Dharmakaya behind Zhu Yin, couldn't help but let out a sigh. In his estimation, this fire god Dharmakaya was on par with his own great son Indestructible body, despite the latter's potential. After all, while the great son Indestructible body had terrifying potential, it was still just a basic supreme Dharmakaya. In terms of ranking, at best it could only make it to around 30. Not far ahead of Zhu Yin's fire god Dharmakaya. In the past, when Chen was still weak, he could crush many proud talents with the might of the great son Indestructible body. But now, as he faced increasingly formidable opponents, he encountered more and more powerful supreme Dharmakayas. If this continued, there would likely come a day when he would face a Dharmakaya even stronger than the great son Indestructible body. At that time, he might experience what it feels like to be suppressed by a supreme Dharmakaya. And it wouldn't be pleasant. Therefore, to prevent this from happening, he had to find the method to evolve the great son Indestructible body within the ancient heavenly palace. Only by evolving it again could he maintain this absolute advantage. Chen's thoughts swirled. Behind Linjing, an overwhelming light gathered. The light was incredibly gentle, as if it could merge with all things. The light condensed into a large, slender figure, radiating a jade-like glow that seemed to fuse with everything around it. In her hands, she held a jade bottle, from which a faint yet captivating energy emanated, as though it contained some terrifying substance. When this supreme Dharmakaya appeared, many powerful practitioners in the heavenly river were taken aback. After a moment of deep thought, someone finally recalled something, and soon, gasps of astonishment echoed across the area. Linjing's Dharmakaya is ranked 28 on the supreme Dharmakaya ranking, the Jade God Dharmakaya. Chen couldn't help but feel a tremor in his heart, and a look of awe appeared on his face. The Jade God physique is not particularly well known in the Great Thousand Worlds. This is not because its reputation does not match its reality, but because its cultivation is exceedingly harsh. The resources required for its cultivation are so immense that even a top-tier power might not be able to cultivate it successfully, even if they drain their resources. What makes the Jade God physique most famous is not its rank, but its extraordinary ability to encompass all things. Once cultivated, it serves as a foundation for further cultivation of even higher-ranking supreme physiques. There's no need to start over. By using the Jade God physique as a base, the speed of cultivating a new supreme physique is accelerated. and the power it yields will combine the strengths of both physiques. It's truly a marvelous phenomenon. Thus, although the Jade God physique ranks only 28th, its potential for growth absolutely places it among the top 10, or even higher. Having a good father is really important. At this moment, even Mu Chen couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps only a massive force like the martial realm and someone like the martial ancestor could provide the conditions for Lin Jing to cultivate the Jade God physique. When the Jade God physique appeared, Zhu Yan was clearly surprised. He gazed deeply at Lin Jing. The foundation she exhibited shook even him. It was clear that this girl's background was likely terrifying, at least not weaker than Xiao Zhao's. Kailuo's eyes darkened, his expression unreadable, making it impossible to discern his thoughts. I wonder what Xiao Zhao's supreme physique is. Mu Chen mused. Sensing the fluctuations from deep within the heavenly river, he glanced at Xiao Zhao again. Her father, the mighty Flame Emperor, must have prepared a supreme physique for her, which surely isn't a trivial one. It seems that while the legendary martial ancestor and Flame Emperor have never crossed paths directly, their daughters, in this situation, are subtly in a competing father scenario. Xiao Zhao gently closed her beautiful eyes, and seven-colored light erupted behind her. Within the radiance, a massive figure appeared. It was a slender and graceful woman. But to Mu Chen's surprise, below her waist, she had a seven-colored snake tail, its scales glimmering with a strange light that caused one's eyes to sting. What kind of supreme physique is that? Mu Chen was stunned upon seeing the figure with the snake tail. As far as he knew, among the 99 supreme physiques, there didn't seem to be one that resembled this. Clearly, the mysterious supreme physique that Xiao Zhao cultivated was not listed among those rankings. However, the strange aura emanating from it made even Mu Chen feel a hint of danger. This unranked supreme physique's power is probably not weaker than the great sun indestructible body. Could it be the supreme physique created by the Flame Emperor? If so, the Flame Emperor is truly terrifying. Mu Chen murmured thoughtfully, clicking his tongue in awe on the heavenly river. There was a constant commotion as many powerful figures were puzzled by Xiao Zhao's mysterious supreme physique. However, those who were unaware of her identity could only speculate in vain. Unable to come to any conclusions at this moment, Mu Chen's gaze became sharp as he turned towards Kailuo. Kailuo also turned his head at that instant. He stared at Mu Chen with a murderous intent in his eyes, and then his lips curled into a slight smirk. With a sudden motion, he formed a hand sealed I in an instant. Vast spiritual energy surged behind him, creating a tremendous wave of energy that shook the space. The towering light gathered behind him, and everyone saw a great sun slowly rise. Beneath the great sun, a massive figure sat, slightly gazing down. As though surveying the world, an immense aura of power shook the space. Mu Chen stared at the great sun indestructible body that appeared behind Kailuo. His pupils couldn't help but constrict sharply at first glance. Kailuo's great sun indestructible body seemed similar to his own, but the one Kailuo cultivated was not golden, but rather a dark and gloomy color. Moreover, the great sun floating behind Kailuo was not the golden one like Mu Chen's, but a black sun at a s. It slowly spun. It resembled a black hole, seemingly ready to devour the world. If Mu Chen's great sun indestructible body resembled a brilliant sun, following the majestic path of kings, then Kailuo's great sun indestructible body was more like a black hole in the starry sky, dark, eerie, and terrifying to behold. Though it was the same supreme physique, the paths they took in cultivation were utterly different. However, when Kailuo refined the great sun indestructible body, the spiritual energy around Mu Chen suddenly began to churn violently. Behind him, light gathered, and the great sun indestructible body he had cultivated seemed about to appear uncontrollably. In the end, he managed to suppress it, but he cast a deep glance at Kailuo. For some reason, he felt that between them, one of their great sun indestructible bodies would eventually be destroyed. Only one could remain. Kailuo looked at Mu Chen indifferently, then smiled lightly, and said, "After I complete this baptism, my great sun indestructible body will reach its peak. By then, your great sun indestructible body will be destroyed by me." Mu Chen lifted his eyelids and said, I think it might be your great son Indestructible body that will become my whetstone. Oh? On what basis? Someone who has even lost the baptism? Jialuluo sneered. A mysterious smile also appeared on Mu Chen's face at this moment. He looked at Jialuluo and chuckled. You think I really lost the baptism? His hands slowly spread open at that moment. Jialuluo's eyes narrowed involuntarily. Just as he was about to speak, his pupils suddenly contracted, for he saw that the heavenly river beneath Mu Chen suddenly erupted with blinding light. Beneath that heavenly river, it seemed as though a boundless blazing sun was rapidly rising. Boom! When the endless light erupted from the heavenly river beneath Mu Chen's feet, countless gazes were immediately drawn to him. All kinds of doubtful and surprised eyes locked onto Mu Chen. Some of the more perceptive experts stared fixedly at the heavenly river beneath Mu Chen. They faintly sensed that there was an extremely terrifying fluctuation rapidly sweeping from deep within the heavenly river. What is that? An expert asked in shock, and some of them looked at Mu Chen in confusion, wondering if he had caused this strange phenomenon. Jialuluo's eyes grew cold as he fixed his gaze on the scene. His eyelid involuntarily twitched, for he was subtly feeling uneasy. For the first time, Mu Chen made him feel as if he was no longer in control. In another direction, Zhu Yin and Su Qingyin were also astonished as they looked at Mu Chen. Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and Nine Nether were slightly pleased. They had originally felt pity for Mu Chen, but now, seeing this scene, it seemed like Mu Chen had something up his sleeve. What exactly is that? This question flashed through everyone's mind, and under the countless astonished gazes, the heavenly river beneath Mu Chen's feet finally began to boil. Everyone watched as endless light pierced through the river and shot out. It seemed as though a massive light ring appeared in the heavenly river beneath Mu Chen's feet. The light ring was so enormous that it shocked everyone. It spanned a full 10,000 zhang, making Mu Chen, who stood on it, look tiny in comparison. However, as the light ring completely detached from the river, it began to rapidly shrink. In just a few breaths, it transformed into 100 zhang-sized light sphere, floating in front of Mu Chen. Countless astonished gazes from the heavenly river focused on the dazzling light sphere in front of Mu Chen. A moment later, their expressions changed as they sensed the fluctuation of the heavenly river spirits within the sphere. But this fluctuation, emanating from the heavenly river spirit contained within the light sphere, was so powerful it made their scalps tingle. Even the 99 heavenly river spirits that Zhu Yin and the others had combined seemed to pale in comparison to this dazzling light sphere. What is this? Numerous experts could not help but exclaim in shock. Under their astonished gazes, Mu Chen flicked his fingers lightly. Suddenly, countless light spots appeared within the 100 zhang light sphere. These light spots danced around like fireflies, yet each one contained an unsettling fluctuation. There were exactly 99 of these light spots. The experts stared at the light sphere with fixed gazes. When they saw the 99 light spots, their eyes instantly flashed, and an expression of horror appeared on their faces. If those 99 light spots were all heavenly river spirits, then adding the massive heavenly river spirit on the outermost layer meant that Mu Chen possessed a total of 100 heavenly river spirits. 100 heavenly river spirits were enough to trigger a perfect level baptism. As this thought crossed everyone's mind, even someone as strong as Zhu Yin and Su Qingyin's expressions suddenly changed. Their gazes became serious as they turned to look at Mu Chen. They had also obtained 99 heavenly river spirits, so they were fully aware of how difficult it was to obtain the 100th heavenly river spirit. More importantly, they had no way of acquiring it. But judging from the current situation, it was clear that Mu Chen had obtained the 100th heavenly river spirit. Creak. Garuda's expression turned dark, and he couldn't help but clench his fist in his sleeve. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Mu Chen. Initially, he had thought that Mu Chen had failed the heavenly river baptism. But he hadn't expected that not only had he succeeded, but he had also surpassed them all, actually managing to collect a full 100 heavenly river spirits, although it was only one more than they had. The difference between them was like an insurmountable chasm. It was the difference between the advanced baptism and the perfect baptism. Mu Chen, is that the 100th heavenly river spirit? From a distance, Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and Jiao, the three women, looked on in shock at the scene. Unable to contain their surprise as they asked. Mu Chen smiled and nodded, not hiding anything as he said, "This 100th heavenly river spirit was fused using the 99 I had collected earlier. I only suspected it before, but it seems my luck wasn't too bad." It was only then that Xiao Xiao and the others understood. They realized how the 100th heavenly river spirit had come about. Though Mu Chen made it sound simple, they could tell that to notice such a method, one had to meditate with extreme focus. Moreover, it required a tremendous amount of courage. Without that, no one would have enough time to collect the remaining 99 heavenly river spirits. Mu Chen's action was undoubtedly a gamble. He was using an advanced baptism, which he could almost certainly obtain, to trade for a perfect baptism, which had a high chance of failing, leaving him with nothing. Many of the powerful figures around the heavenly river secretly sighed. Even if they knew this method, they doubted they would have the courage to choose it. This Mu Chen is indeed extraordinary. Some strong individuals looked at Mu Chen with a hint of admiration in their eyes. The fact that he, with his strength barely at the 9th grade, had killed Xiaoyu with his own hands, showed he had qualities far beyond ordinary people. Even Zhu Yin glanced deeply at Mu Chen, vaguely feeling some wariness. Though he wasn't afraid of Mu Chen now, he had an intuition that the next time they met, this person would truly surprise him, perhaps even surpass him. As for the various gazes from the crowd, Mu Chen paid them no mind. He merely cast a brief glance at Garuda, whose eyes were filled with malice, then smiled faintly and ignored the increasingly cold look directed at him. With a snap of his fingers, the massive light orb in front of him shot up into the sky with a whoosh. Buzz! The light orb shot into the sky, disappearing beyond sight. It seemed to pause for a moment before an endless wave of light surged outward, covering the sky with a dazzling brilliance. The light stretched as far as the eye could see, seemingly covering the entire expanse of the heavenly river. The grandiose spectacle left the countless powerful figures present utterly stunned. The light flooded the area, and then spiritual mist spread out, enveloping the sky. After a few dozen breaths, a clear sound like rushing water was heard from above. The mist swirled, gradually dispersing under the intense gaze of countless observers. As the mist cleared, the scene in the sky became clear to everyone. Hiss. When the crowd finally saw what was happening in the sky, shock-filled gasps echoed almost instantly. What is that? Some of the strong figures were so stunned they could hardly speak. Zhu Yin, Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and the others all looked up. Even they were visibly moved, and Garuda's fingers tightened suddenly. In the sky, the vast, sparkling river water surged through the air. Its overwhelming presence stretched endlessly, making it appear as though an infinite heavenly river had formed above them. Compared to this boundless river, even the massive lakes of Zhu Yin and the others seemed insignificant, as though there was a stark contrast between a hill and a towering pillar. In the vast heavenly river above, there were particles resembling crystals, shining with dazzling clarity. These crystal-like particles contained highly condensed spiritual energy, something that could only be cultivated once someone reached the Earth's supreme realm. Occasionally, spiritual mist would rise from the surface of the river, transforming into shapes of dragons, phoenixes, tigers, and leopards. Roars could even be heard, creating an incredible spectacle. Is this the legendary perfect baptism? Numerous powerful individuals slowly regained their senses, still filled with shock. What Mu Chen had summoned was not some mere stream, river, or lake phenomenon. It was the manifestation of another heavenly river. Compared to this heavenly river, all other baptism phenomena seemed insignificant. Mu Chen has really struck it big this time. Even Lin Jing couldn't help but marvel, though there was no jealousy, only joy for Mu Chen's achievements. The heavenly river baptism was indeed precious, but for someone like Lin Jing, who had seen countless treasures, it was not something that would make one regret missing out. Under the envious gazes of many, Mu Chen raised his head. He gazed at the magnificent heavenly river above, and couldn't help but smile. It seemed that this gamble had paid off for him in the end. Now, it was time for him to enjoy this so-called perfect baptism and see how powerful it truly was. Mu Chen, is that the 100th heavenly river spirit? From a distance, Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and Jiuyo, the three women, looked on in shock at the scene, unable to contain their surprise as they asked. Mu Chen smiled and nodded, not hiding anything as he said. This 100th heavenly river spirit was fused using the 99 I had collected earlier. I only suspected it before, but it seems my luck wasn't too bad. It was only then that Xiao Xiao and the others understood. They realized how the 100th heavenly river spirit had come about. Though Mu Chen made it sound simple, they could tell that to notice such a method, one had to meditate with extreme focus. Moreover, it required a tremendous amount of courage. Without that, no one would have enough time to collect the remaining 99 heavenly river spirits. Mu Chen's action was undoubtedly a gamble. He was using an advanced baptism, which he could almost certainly obtain, to trade for a perfect baptism, which had a high chance of failing, leaving him with nothing. Many of the powerful figures around the heavenly river secretly sighed. Even if they knew this method, they doubted they would have the courage to choose it. This Mu Chen is indeed extraordinary. Some strong individuals looked at Mu Chen with a hint of admiration in their eyes. The fact that he, with his strength barely at the 9th grade, had killed Xiaoyu with his own hands, showed he had qualities far beyond ordinary people. Even Zhu Yin glanced deeply at Mu Chen, vaguely feeling some wariness. Though he wasn't afraid of Mu Chen now, he had an intuition that the next time they met, this person would truly surprise him, perhaps even surpass him. As for the various gazes from the crowd, Mu Chen paid them no mind. He merely cast a brief glance at Garuda, whose eyes were filled with malice, then smiled faintly and ignored the increasingly cold look directed at him. With a snap of his fingers, the massive light orb in front of him shot up into the sky with a whoosh. Buzz. The light orb shot into the sky, disappearing beyond sight. It seemed to pause for a moment before an endless wave of light surged outward, covering the sky with a dazzling brilliance. The light stretched as far as the eye could see, seemingly covering the entire expanse of the heavenly river. The grandiose spectacle left the countless powerful figures present utterly stunned. The light flooded the area, and then spiritual mist spread out, enveloping the sky. After a few dozen breaths, a clear sound like rushing water was heard from above. The mist swirled, gradually dispersing under the intense gaze of countless observers. As the mist cleared, the scene in the sky became clear to everyone. Hiss! When the crowd finally saw what was happening in the sky, shock-filled gasps echoed almost instantly. What is that? Some of the strong figures were so stunned they could hardly speak. Zhu Yan, Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and the others all looked up. Even they were visibly moved, and Garuda's fingers tightened suddenly. In the sky, the vast, sparkling river water surged through the air. Its overwhelming presence stretched endlessly, making it appear as though an infinite heavenly river had formed above them. Compared to this boundless river, even the massive lakes of Zhu Yin and the others seemed insignificant, as though there was a stark contrast between a hill and a towering pillared eye in the vast heavenly river above. There were particles resembling crystals, shining with dazzling clarity. These crystal-like particles contained highly condensed spiritual energy, something that could only be cultivated once someone reached the Earth's supreme realm. Occasionally, spiritual mist would rise from the surface of the river, transforming into shapes of dragons, phoenixes, tigers, and leopards. Roars could even be heard, creating an incredible spectacle. Is this the legendary perfect baptism? Numerous powerful individuals slowly regained their senses, still filled with shock. What Mu Chen had summoned was not some mere stream, river, or lake phenomenon. It was the manifestation of another heavenly river. Compared to this heavenly river, all other baptism phenomena seemed insignificant. Mu Chen has really struck it big this time. Even Lin Jing couldn't help but marvel, though there was no jealousy, only joy for Mu Chen's achievements. The heavenly river baptism was indeed precious, but for someone like Lin Jing, who had seen countless treasures, it was not something that would make one regret missing out. Under the envious gazes of many, Mu Chen raised his head. He gazed at the magnificent heavenly river above, and couldn't help but smile that it seemed that this gamble had paid off for him in the end. Now, it was time for him to enjoy this so-called perfect baptism and see how powerful it truly was. As perfect baptism ahead of him, his own experience appeared rather lacking. His face grew cold as he looked at Mu Chen and the golden, radiant great sun indestructible body beneath him. And a strong killing intent appeared in his eyes. He could sense that the power contained within Mu Chen's great sun indestructible body was quickly approaching his own. With the help of this perfect level heavenly river baptism, Mu Chen's progress even made Garuda feel a mix of shock and anger. For the first time, Garuda regretted not acting earlier. Had he known this would happen, he should have made his move sooner to eliminate Mu Chen before things escalated. Now, Mu Chen had begun to feel like a real threat. However, no matter how much regret Garuda felt, it was now too late. He could sense that. Although Mu Chen was undergoing the baptism, he was still secretly watching him. If Garuda made a move, Mu Chen could use the power of the heavenly river baptism to retaliate. What a disaster! Garuda sighed deeply. Eventually, his gaze dropped. His expression returned to indifference. Although he had overestimated his own strength this time, it didn't matter. The gap between him and Mu Chen was still too wide to be bridged by a single perfect heavenly river baptism. When the next opportunity arose, Garuda was confident he would strike with thunderous force and completely eliminate Mu Chen. For now, however, he would finish his own advanced baptism. After all, it would still bring him improvement. As Garuda withdrew his murderous gaze, Mu Chen's slightly closed eyes flickered. He had been constantly on guard against Garuda, even attempting to provoke him earlier, hoping that Garuda would be unable to resist and make a move. If that happened, he could use the power of the heavenly river baptism to launch a devastating attack on Garuda. However, Garuda's caution exceeded Mu Chen's expectations. He had managed to suppress his killing intent and, in the face of Mu Chen's rapid growth, chose to endure such a troublesome opponent. Mu Chen silently sighed. Garuda's character and tactics were clearly extraordinary and not to be underestimated. But since Garuda had chosen to remain silent for now, Mu Chen no longer divided his focus and began to fully embrace the perfect baptism's cleansing. There would certainly be a life and death battle between them in the future, and the feeling Garuda gave him was one of extreme danger. Therefore, he had to seize every moment and opportunity to quickly improve his own strength. Mu Chen slightly opened his eyes. From afar, he glanced at the great sun indestructible body beneath Garuda's feet, which was exuding a dark, shadowy hue. A deep glint flickered in his gaze. His spiritual perception made him realize that, in terms of both the power and the profound spiritual energy of the two great sun indestructible bodies, Garuda's was undoubtedly stronger. If the two were to clash head-on, Mu Chen believed he would not come out on top. After all, Garuda had been cultivating the great sun indestructible body for a much longer time than him, and the sacred demon palace had invested all its resources in his development. This only showed how highly the sacred demon emperor regarded him. Garuda had entered the Nine Perfection realm long ago, and was currently searching for a way to break through to the Earth Supreme realm. As for Mu Chen, he was still only at the early stages of the Nine realm. The gap between them was undeniable, and even Mu Chen had to admit this fact. A battle with Garuda is probably not far off. I'll need to continue steadily refining my great sun indestructible body. Surpassing Garuda's might won't be easy. Even if I get close, when the time comes to fight, I still won't have an absolute advantage. Mu Chen's mind raced. Though he had many trump cards, including the Wind God Fan, he didn't believe Garuda was without a true sacred artifact. Thus, if he wanted to defeat Garuda, he would have to prepare in advance. Mu Chen lowered his gaze at the great sun indestructible body beneath him, then narrowed his eyes. After hesitating for only a moment, he decisively closed them again. At that instant, his thoughts shifted, and the golden light that had been extending from within the great sun indestructible body suddenly stopped growing. The spiritual energy that had been rapidly strengthening within it also began to slow down. The vast power from the perfect baptism was quietly being funneled into an unknown place by Mu Chen. After doing so, Mu Chen once again tightly closed his eyes. His body erupted with golden light, while the true dragon and true phoenix spirits that coiled around his shoulders let out loud roars of the dragon and phoenix. His spiritual energy and physical strength rapidly increased under the continual wash of the heavenly river baptism's power. While the growth of the great sun indestructible body temporarily slowed, Mu Chen's own strength had to increase at an even faster rate. Like the mighty flow of a dragon, Mu Chen's arms slowly spread open. Above the heavenly river, the surging spiritual energy continued to sweep through, causing the heavenly river below to churn with towering waves. At this moment, nearly everyone had triggered the heavenly river baptism. The various baptisms that descended from the sky, large or small, now seemed somewhat pale in comparison to Mu Chen's terrifying vision. However, despite feeling somewhat frustrated by being overshadowed by Mu Chen's perfect baptism, the vast majority of people were extremely satisfied. This baptism had provided them with enormous gains, and their future growth would become much easier as a result. As time passed, more and more baptisms came to an end, and the once tumultuous heavenly river gradually returned to calm. Only a few of the higher-level baptisms remained in progress. Of course, Mu Chen's one-of-a-kind perfect baptism was still ongoing. With a sharp cry, the Nine Nether baptism was completed at that moment. This time, she had transformed into her true form, a massive Nine Nether soul sparrow, with wings that stretched so far they seemed endless. Each time its wings flapped, torrents of spiritual energy swept through, causing the space to distort with the force. On the body of the Nine Nether soul sparrow, crystalline lights could be seen, barely noticeable but enough to enhance the physical strength of the Nine Nether's form. The dark light around the Nine Nether Soul Sparrow began to expand, then rapidly contracted, eventually transforming into a slender and graceful figure. Nine Nether stood in the air, her tightly shut eyes suddenly snapping open, and crystal-clear flames surged like solid substance. A powerful spiritual pressure erupted from her body. Upon sensing this spiritual pressure, the surrounding powerful individuals couldn't help but show signs of alarm. This kind of spiritual energy had already reached the 9 perfection level. Clearly, after Qin Jingxia, Nine Nether had also used this high-level baptism to break through and reach the 9 perfection tier. Following Nine Nether, Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, Zhu Yin, Su Qingyin, Garuda, and others also completed their baptisms one after another. However, none of them had broken through, as this level required a breakthrough into the Earth Supreme Realm. The realm they were striving for was not easy to break through. Therefore, what they needed to do now was to continuously accumulate. Once the accumulation reached a point where things naturally fell into place, they would dare to attempt a breakthrough. However, although they had not yet broken through, anyone could sense that at this moment, Xiao Xiao and the others had clearly become more unfathomable compared to before their baptism. As soon as Xiao Xiao and the others completed their baptism, their gazes immediately turned toward the direction where Mu Chen was. At that moment, the vast and boundless heavenly river in the sky began to gradually become illusory. The last torrent of water washed down from Mu Chen's heavenly spirit cap and entered him, and Mu Chen, whose eyes were tightly shut, suddenly opened them at this moment. Buzz. The instant Mu Chen's eyes opened, a brilliant light seemed to appear out of nowhere in the world. The light filled the entire realm, making it impossible to look directly at it, forcing everyone to avert their gaze, and the source of this light was none other than Mu Chen's eyes. However, at this moment, his eyes appeared extremely dark and deep. Within his pupils, it seemed as if the heavenly river was falling, exuding an unfathomable mystery. Boom! At the same time, an extremely powerful spiritual energy fluctuation, like a storm, suddenly erupted from Mu Chen's body, wreaking havoc across the world. That spiritual energy fluctuation must be at the peak 9th grade. Many strong experts sensed the energy fluctuation, and their eyes immediately flashed. It seemed that Mu Chen had used the perfect baptism to directly break through, reaching the peak 9th grade level. However, no one was particularly surprised by this increase. Instead, they were somewhat astonished. After all, a perfect heavenly river baptism had only allowed Mu Chen to reach this level. After all, Mu Chen had already been at the peak of the 9th grade before, and it was only a matter of time before he entered the peak 9th grade with some refinement of his spiritual energy. Therefore, the fact that there was only this much progress was almost unbelievable. No, Mu Chen's spiritual energy is still increasing. Just as everyone was puzzled, they suddenly realized that the spiritual energy surging from Mu Chen's body had not stabilized. Instead, it was continuing to increase rapidly. Boom, boom, a massive surge of spiritual energy, like a flood, poured out. The feeling of its fluctuation quickly climbed to the peak of the 9th grade and then began a tentative assault, attempting to reach the perfect 9th grade. However, this attempt initially failed multiple times, barely touching the threshold of the perfect 9th grade. Fortunately, the spiritual energy erupting from Mu Chen's body was incredibly resilient. After repeated failures, it finally crossed that final step. The stretching and contracting spiritual energy surged like a burst of floodwaters, flowing freely without any obstacles. Mu Chen had finally, in that moment, stepped into the perfect 9th grade. Thanks to this perfect heavenly river baptism, he had directly advanced from the early 9th grade to the perfect 9th grade. The perfect heavenly river baptism truly lives up to its reputation. Above the heavenly river, many strong experts secretly sighed. Such a baptism was almost equivalent to years of arduous cultivation for them. However, even though they were facing Mu Chen's breakthrough through 2 levels, they were not overly surprised. After all, this was the perfect baptism. While the crowd was marveling at Mu Chen's rapid growth, Xiao Xiao, Nine Nether, and Lin Jing, in another direction, frowned slightly. Others might think that Mu Chen's 2-level breakthrough should be quite satisfying, but they did not share this sentiment. They could clearly see that Mu Chen's previous breakthrough had not been easy. In fact, it had only been after several attempts that he had barely stepped into the perfect 9th grade. This was a sign of insufficient spiritual energy during the breakthrough. This kind of situation had not occurred even for Qin Jingxia and Nine Nether, and they had only undergone an advanced baptism. But Mu Chen, he had received the perfect baptism. The heavenly river baptism was one of the core foundations of the ancient heavenly palace, and the perfect baptism was of even greater importance. It was said that during that era, almost every disciple who received the perfect baptism in the ancient heavenly palace eventually became a significant figure within the palace. This clearly showed how powerful the perfect heavenly river baptism was. Originally, Xiao Xiao and the others had expected Mu Chen to smoothly enter the perfect 9th grade, but seeing the situation before them, they couldn't help but feel a sense of confusion. Xiao Xiao and the others glanced at the great sun indestructible body beneath Mu Chen's feet. At this moment, the supreme Dharmakaya radiated a golden light so intense that, from a distance, it resembled a golden Buddha, mysterious and vast. Clearly, after undergoing the heavenly river baptism, the supreme Dharmakaya had received a significant enhancement. However, this enhancement still didn't reach the expected level. Xiao Xiao and the others exchanged glances. The spiritual energy from the perfect baptism hadn't allowed Mu Chen to steadily reach the perfect 9th grade, nor had it made his supreme Dharmakaya extremely powerful. So, where did that spiritual energy go? Could it be that after thousands of years, the heavenly river's perfect baptism had started to lose its efficacy? If that were the case, then Mu Chen had truly suffered a great loss. Xiao Xiao and the others sighed lightly, feeling sorry for Mu Chen. Originally, he could have used the windfall from this perfect baptism to reach the same level as Zhu Yin, Kalpavriksha, and others. However, this setback had turned that ambition into a shadow of what could have been. Although Mu Chen had barely entered the perfect 9th grade, there were still variations in strength within the same grade. For example, Qin Jingxia, though also at perfect 9th grade, would likely be crushed if he faced Kalpavriksha in battle. Of course, Mu Chen was not an ordinary case. When he first entered the 9th grade, he had already slain Xiaoyu, another perfect 9th grade expert. Now, having reached the same stage, if a true top-tier figure from the perfect 9th grade challenged him, Mu Chen would not be afraid. But now, the situation seemed to have become a little more troublesome. As Xiao Xiao and the others sighed in disappointment, a powerful surge of spiritual energy erupted from Mu Chen's body, quickly retracting. The great sun indestructible body beneath his feet dissipated. He glanced down at the place where the great sun indestructible body had vanished. His youthful face remained calm, showing no sign of disappointment. Having undergone the perfect baptism himself, Mu Chen was naturally more aware than anyone else that both he and the great sun indestructible body could have reached a higher level. Heh. It looks like your luck isn't too good. A mocking voice suddenly echoed from afar. Mu Chen raised his head and saw Kalpavriksha, standing with one hand behind his back, gazing at him with a smile that seemed neither here nor there. Clearly, Kalpavriksha had noticed that Mu Chen's perfect baptism hadn't been as complete as expected. Yeah, Mu Chen replied calmly, acknowledging Kalpavriksha's mocking tone without agitation. Kalpavriksha smiled slightly when he saw Mu Chen's composed demeanor and said, "What a pity. I had thought there would be a fierce battle between us, but it seems you've missed your chance." Despite Mu Chen's rapid rise in strength, Kalpavriksha could still sense that the gap between them remained. Having reached the perfect 9th grade years ago, Kalpavriksha had undergone countless trials, steadily increasing his foundation. Mu Chen, on the other hand, had only just entered the perfect 9th grade, and his foundation was far from as solid. Thus, if a life-and-death battle were to take place, Kalpavriksha was confident that he would emerge victorious. However, in response to Kalpavriksha's words, Mu Chen simply stared at him. After a moment, he smiled and nodded. "Indeed, it's a pity." His tone remained as indifferent as ever. But to Kalpavriksha's ears, this only made his smile falter. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Mu Chen, wondering if the latter had been mentally affected by the setback. Nonetheless, Kalpavriksha wasn't an ordinary person. His gaze quickly returned to normal as he nodded and smiled at Mu Chen. "I hope that when I destroy your great sun indestructible body, you can still maintain this calm." "All right." A smile once again appeared on Mu Chen's handsome face, but this time, there seemed to be a different meaning in it. Seeing this, Kalpavriksha's eyelids twitched slightly. For some reason, he felt a vague sense of unease deep inside his heart. A mere brat who has just entered perfect 9th grade. His foundation is not as strong as mine, his methods are inferior to mine, and his supreme Dharmakaya falls short compared to mine. Does he really think he can turn the tide in this battle of Dharmakayas? Trying to use tricks to make me suspicious and ruin my plans. How ridiculous. Kalpavriksha took a deep breath, his thoughts swirling. He then gave Mu Chen one last dark look. no longer willing to say anything else. With a swift wave of his sleeve, he transformed into a streak of light, shooting toward the heavenly river. Quickly disappearing from sight. As Garuda departed, the heavenly river once again became lively, with powerful figures no longer lingering and starting to transform into streaks of light, heading deeper into the ancient heavenly palace. After all, this trip to the ancient heavenly palace was just an appetizer. Deep within, it was said to be the dwelling place of the legendary heavenly emperor, guarded by the 4 hall masters of the ancient heavenly palace. If one could obtain any of their inheritances, they would surely have a place in the great thousand worlds. At this moment, Zhu Yin glanced at Mu Chen, then turned to Xiao Xiao. She noticed and casually cast a languid, indifferent look in his direction. Zhu Yin didn't say much, but a fierce battle intent flickered in his eyes. He stomped his foot, transforming into a streak of fire and disappearing. Su Qingyin gave Mu Chen a playful smile, clearly showing interest in him, but in the end, she only waved her jade-like hand and left. As the crowd dispersed, Mu Chen appeared beside Xiao Xiao and the others. He raised his head, gazing into the depths of the ancient heavenly palace, and said with a smile, "Let's go. The heavenly river baptism is over, and it's time for us to move forward." His next destination was the scripture pavilion of the ancient heavenly palace. The method to evolve his great son Indestructible body should be there. It was also at that time that the battle of life and death between him and Garuda would likely begin. Mu Chen looked in the direction Garuda had gone, a faint smile playing on his lips. A deep, thoughtful expression appeared in his pitch-black eyes. "I've prepared to this extent for you. I just hope you won't disappoint me when the time comes."